All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. You got, well, Marcel, you'll be our audience. So
Okay.
the rest of us work on the project, everyone I'm seeing so far. So welcome tonight. My name's Perry Clausen, and we'll be talking about the Modesto-Turlock Management Zone development. And I'm with the Valley Water Collaborative. And you'll also be hearing from Richard Meyerhoff from GEI Consultants, Vicki Kretzinger, Graybert with Ludor Scalmanini. Barbara is also on the line, but he's going to be sharing the podium with her when we get to the technical information. And we'll go to the next slide and give you a little tutorial on how to do Zoom meetings. You probably know this better than us, but we'll go through this. Yeah. Lydia, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a few guidelines for the meeting today, some housekeeping items, if you will. So if you could look at the participant list, and if you are not named already on the list, if you could go ahead and rename yourself so that we can easily identify who you are. If you're not able to do that through the participant list, if you wouldn't mind emailing me your name, and I'll go ahead and update that information for you. The other thing we ask is that if you're not speaking, if you could be on mute. We are going to have two places within the presentation that people can unmute themselves and ask questions. We do have a little bit of guidance around asking the questions, though. You could either raise your hand during the Q&A period, and when you're identified, unmute yourself and ask your question. Or if you want to put your question into the chat, I will go ahead and read your question aloud to the group. Last, if you're having any technical issues of any kind, if you could reach out to me or Grace Martin, who's the co-host, we will do our best to help you stay connected and be able to hear the entire presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so this, other than having an agenda, we're really on this presentation going to be answering a series of questions here. And I'm not going to read over them independently because we will be touching each of those, but I'll give you a little elevator speech on what we're doing. It is a very complicated issue, and I've tried to bring it down to a real basic level. And what it starts out is that nitrate is being found in our drinking water supplies above the standards set by the state in the Modesto and Turlock groundwater basins. And last year, there was a change in state regulations mandating that industries that have nitrate in their discharges, and this includes agriculture, cities, and industry, cooperatively work together to develop a plan to identify residences in those two basins that are impacted by high nitrates in their domestic wells. And this could be the single wells or the multiple wells that are throughout the region. And the plan that we have to develop has to outline strategies to provide access to safe drinking water to these affected residences. And that could be bottled water delivery, neighborhood bottle filling stations, and things that may be point of use of treatments. So as an overview, that's what our issue is, and throughout this presentation we'll be talking about the steps in that plan development. And one thing that we will be doing in the future, we will be having a Spanish translation service available if folks request that. We put that out in the invite and did not get requests for this meeting. So Valley Water Collaborative is a new organization that was formed this summer, actually, and it's a nonprofit organization, 501c3, that we're applying for, and it was established in the management zones for Modesto and Turlock to address nitrate contamination. And the group is reaching out to find partners in the area to help improve nitrate water quality in the groundwater in the future. And we want to work with as many community organizations as we can. Certainly, as we mentioned, Marcel, we'd be great to have some assistance with you, with your group. And we have a mission that you can see here. The goal is ultimately, though, to provide access to safe drinking water for residents. There are people that are drinking high nitrate water. We want to identify them and provide safe water for them. But it's also got to be related to the quality of life in our region, that we can help improve that through our efforts over time. So why are we here today? We have these small communities that I mentioned, the rural residents that rely on groundwater, and it may not be possible to safely use this groundwater for drinking water when the nitrates are too high. There is a health aspect to very high nitrates to the sensitive groups, but we're working on developing both the short and long-term solutions for dealing with this nitrates that are in the water, in the groundwater supplies that they're accessing right now. So why be concerned about nitrates? Drinking water that comes from groundwater that enters our homes may require actions if it's impacted by nitrates. Now, we do want to point out public water systems for the cities, in particular Modesto-Turlock series, any of our large cities, they are public water systems that have to treat for constituents that are above the drinking water standards. And in fact, they will sometimes shut the public systems down or certain wells if they exceed the state standards. So they're not really an audience. We want them to know about this program and such, but our audience is really the people, our target audience is people that have domestic wells, because they're obviously privately operated. They may not have been tested before. And we want to make sure that they are aware that the aquifers in areas have high nitrates. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we will be offering a well testing so that folks can find out what this quality of water is in their domestic well. So what is nitrate? It is a contaminant. It makes water unsafe for drinking when it's above the state levels that are set for safety, 10 milligrams per liter. And it's not, you can't see it, smell it, taste it. There are some people that say they can tell this texture of water at high levels, but generally somebody that's uninformed or doesn't know that, you can't taste it in your water. And where nitrate comes from is it is an important nutrient for growing crops. So it's included in fertilizers. Both commercial and organic fertilizers have nitrate. Manure-based compost, green waste compost, they all have nitrates. And then another area where they can come from, especially in these domestic wells, are leaking septic tanks. And so nitrate doesn't by itself move through the soil profile into aquifers. It has to be carried by rainwater or irrigation water down through the soil profile into the groundwater. And when it's unsafe is when it is above that 10 milligrams per liter. Nitrate is nitrogen, and it's especially for sensitive groups that there's a major concern for, and we'll cover those a little bit later. So how does nitrate get into the well? A very common pathway, probably one of the more common besides leaching through the soil profile, is older wells. Back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when wells were put in, they didn't have nearly the sealing requirements that new wells have. In fact, many of them were put through without even hardly any sealing at all. And that can provide a pathway for nutrients or other nitrate sources to be moved through the well casing surrounding the casing itself. And where the groundwater is coming from is these water-bearing deposits beneath the soil surface of sands and gravels that we have below that store this water for use for the pumping that we do. And all these wells that are being put in now, county has very strict standards, but it's very important to be protected from surface land activities that are done on the surface. And it really does help reduce these contaminants. So I'll pause for a second, and any questions about what we covered so far?
No. So you're saying it was just the wells that were from the 40s and 50s. Is there like a good record of when wells, like domestic wells, were drilled, or domestic wells used like state smalls and things like that?
It's all over the board. State smalls, I believe it's a little better, and I know Vicki and Vicki's worked in our area. Maybe I can have Vicki answer that, as she's done a lot of investigations. There was a recent change in the law where well construction information was made available to the public, and we had in another program went into those databases and found that the construction information is not so good. And we're, again, the newer wells, the last 10, even 20 years, there's a better idea, but those older wells are really not that good of a database as to when they're constructed and how they've been sealed, especially domestic wells.
Mm-hmm.
Right, to add on to that, the Department of Water Resources didn't start requiring the submittal of well construction reports from drilling contractors until about 1970. So the older wells weren't really required to report how those wells were being constructed.
And was that just how they were constructed and a specific location? I know there was quite a bit of an issue with finding the wells.
Yes, good point. I mean, even today, the location is difficult. I mean, the drilling contractors, there's not specific requirements for latitude and longitude and, you know, GIS coordinates or anything of the like so far. So there's a high reliance on the address, and also maps used to be the form that the drilling contractors would use to submit with the reports, but often those were lacking geographic detail to be able to even locate the well. So often it's very difficult to connect up the log to the actual well.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have an approach that we used in Salinas Valley that we're going to use here that essentially takes a map and you get a GIS layer with a public water system. So you figure that they're probably good. And then everybody else that's got an address likely is on a well. I mean, there's some small water systems that will also be outlined, but you can pretty much assume that the people that are on these rural residences and semi-rural residences are on domestic well, and we will be contacting them to let them know about this program, especially when the water is available. The drinking water is going to be available.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Meyerhoff with GEI Consultants, and he'll talk about some of the more the program details.
All right. Thank you, Perry. So everything's been described so far is clearly focused on nitrate as a concern, and a lot of what we're doing and initiating now is driven by a new nitrate control program that was adopted by the Central Valley Water Board and approved by the State Water Board in 2019. So the program is kicking off this year, not just where we're talking about here, the Modesto-Turlock groundwater subbasins, but in other areas of the Central Valley as well. There are three key goals. If you take the entire program and summarize it to three goals, this is what you see. The first and foremost is to address the safe drinking water concerns in groundwater, where nitrate is exceeding 10, and focus on those areas and make sure people have safe drinking water. The second goal is a little bit longer term goal, and that is to reduce nitrate impacts to water supplies and groundwater. And essentially that's a way of saying no longer degrade water quality. So no longer have new impacts to groundwater moving forward. And finally, over the very long term, work towards restoration where it's reasonable, feasible, and practicable. And by that we mean if there's a groundwater area that has nitrate greater than 10, work to bring it back to where it's below 10 and safe to drink again. All of these steps will take obviously a number of years to do. One of the mechanisms in the control program to make this happen is called a management zone. And that is a new framework that has been established in the regulation, and the Valley Water Collaborative that Perry described was formed purposefully to be the organization that forms the Modesto-Turlock Management Zone to implement these goals in this area. So the management zone approach is a way of working collectively together to solve the problem. And it's a different paradigm for resolving water quality issues. Historically, and the norm is for each entity that may impact water quality to have their own permit and to work on their own to resolve the compliance issues that they've been requested to deal with per the regulations. Under the nitrate control program, permittees, those that discharge nitrate, will be allowed to work together and through this mechanism of the management zone to deal with the nitrate concerns and address the goals. One of the key benefits of this is it will bring safe drinking water faster. The permittees can work together to share costs rather than duplicate efforts, so it's more cost effective. And probably one of the best reasons to have a management zone is it provides opportunity for the local community to work collectively with the dischargers to solve the problems using local approaches and solutions that the community wants. So who needs to be involved? And we ask this question, I mean, the big answer is everybody. We would like to be involved, but they break up into different categories. The first three lines in this slide, the growers, the dairies, feedlots and poultry farms, and wastewater treatment operators and the like, these are all dischargers. They all operate under different types of permits that have been issued by the Central Valley Water Board, and they all have the potential to contribute nitrate to groundwater. They need to be involved simply because the nitrate control program says they have to comply with these new regulations. In addition, though, there's plenty of entities in the planning area, the management zone area, that have interest in quality issues, water quality, as well as the management of water. How much water is there available? Like the groundwater sustainability agencies, water utilities, government agencies, and very important, non-governmental organizations or NGOs that also come into play because they have various interests and support various groups of people in the area. So they need to be participating as well because they have common interests. And then ultimately, we want to work directly with the public to the extent that we can and get them engaged because they're the ones that we are trying to reach to provide safe drinking water to in the long run. So that's generally the program in a very simple form. And I'm going to turn it to Vicki with Ludor Scalmanini Consulting Engineers to talk about where do we know at this time where water is affected by nitrate.
Thank you, Richard. So to develop effective solutions to the nitrate problems, we need to compile and use all the available data at hand to understand where the nitrate levels are present in these groundwater basins in the Modesto and Turlock areas. So for the work that we're conducting at this time, we're compiling already existing data from many public agencies. These data sources include national, state, and local agencies that provide this information directly to the public on their websites. Some of this data, although some of it's available publicly, there's also other data that's not generally available publicly, and this needs to be specially requested. For example, there's data from local counties that we specially requested this for this project. The list of data sources for the Modesto and Turlock basins is shown on the left-hand side of this slide, and the map on the right-hand side shows where all the wells that sometime since the early 1940s have been sampled for nitrate. The majority of the wells that are shown here with nitrate data include about 1,500 domestic wells that were sampled in the past couple of years as part of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. And these are the wells that you see on the map in the olive-colored dots. This map illustrates all of the wells for which we have compiled the best available existing nitrate data in these areas at this time, and it helps us understand the distribution and concentrations of nitrate in groundwater. So although this new program focuses mostly on recent nitrate conditions, we don't always have recent data to help us understand what the nitrate levels are in groundwater beneath the entire area of interest. So to identify the areas affected by nitrate, we've gathered all this data as we just talked about in the previous slide. The map on the right illustrates the maximum measured nitrate concentration in all the wells that are shown by each of these dots. Some of these dots overlay other dots, so there are a lot of wells that have nitrate data. And the color represents the highest nitrate level measured out of all the sample collected at any one well. This particular map also, it covers groundwater testing that's gone on since 1943. The red and the orange dots on the map represent wells that are considered to have the most elevated concentrations. The wells with the red dots are those that have nitrate levels that exceed the maximum contaminant level for nitrate of 10 milligrams per liter nitrate as nitrogen. So with this preliminary map, it helps us identify all the areas where nitrate has been and may still be a potential problem, As part of the current work, we're considering all this data to identify the areas where unsafe levels of nitrate may exist in drinking water. And we're identifying those areas that are served by community water systems that treat water for nitrate so that we know where water is safe to drink. And most importantly, we're identifying the areas where we estimate domestic wells are located and that may exist in areas with potentially unsafe nitrate levels. With all of this information, this provides the basis for the preliminary work associated with the development of the early action plan. And this is what Richard's going to describe next. So I'll turn it back to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. All right, so once we understand where the key areas are that we need to prioritize and focus on that we know have elevated nitrate, the management zone will take that information and use it to help prepare what's called the early action plan. And that is a key deliverable that is part of the nitrate control program and required for any management zone in the area. The early action plan is implemented early, and that so it purposely has its name early, and that it's looking to identify short-term solutions to make sure that folks in the area that are known to have potential concerns of drinking water get safe drinking water sooner than later. So the early action plan, once implemented, will utilize various tools that will be developed over the next few months as we move forward with this project. And examples of the types of tools that might be included for implementation include the use of centrally located fill stations that can provide clean water. These will be available to the community to get water at no cost to them. There is other options that might be considered, such as bottled water delivery or use of treatment systems such as point of use treatment systems that treat the water at a specific location in a home. All of these will be discussed as we move forward, especially in our next community outreach meeting, so that we work with you, the community, to share with you what the options are that we're considering and have you provide us feedback with regards to your thoughts on those different solutions. The early action plan, as I said, is early in the sense that it's what we want to do first, but the overall nitrate control program over the many years it will be implemented seeks to identify permanent long-term solutions that resolve the problem in perpetuity. So the question is, how can you participate? Well, there's many ways. There's purely from a data standpoint, if you have a well or know of people that have wells and you know they've had their wells tested for nitrate and know the concentration, anytime we can get that information from domestic well owners, it's very helpful to the project, and that information can be shared and included in our analysis as to where we need to focus our efforts. We also want your input on the development of the management zone. I've mentioned specifically the early action plan itself. Work with us on the development of solutions tailored for the area covered by the zone. But also there's another document that gets produced at the same time. It's called a preliminary management zone proposal. It is the bigger umbrella document that talks about this management zone, how it's being formed, what it's going to do down the road, and their subsequent deliverables beyond that. Anyone who participates can contribute their thoughts to those documents. Tell your neighbors. We are reaching out as best as we can, identifying people who have can share information around, and we ask that you do the same if you know of people who would be interested in this project. And then, of course, get on the mailing list so that you're always aware of when we're having our meetings. It also provides you a vehicle to communicate with the project. And there's a page at the website, www.valleywaterc.org, where you can contact the organization as well as also sign up to receive information in the future. In addition, as I said, we're having more meetings. This first one is a kickoff meeting. This is the second of 2 days. So we had a meeting yesterday. This is our second meeting, same information to just at a different time. So we hopefully capture some additional people. And this is more informational. Our next meeting we're looking to have will be in early December. And at that meeting, we'll come to talk about different ideas for what the types of solutions that might be included in the early action plan. And then we will have another one. And we say January, February, but more likely about mid-January. We'll come back to you where you can start looking at the actual drafts of the early action plan and give your thoughts. We always are looking for communication through meetings, but if there are those who really get into reading and commenting on documents, those will be publicly available at a certain point for you to comment on. And this is just the beginning. The management zones formed through this process. The early action plan is developed. The early action plan itself is required by regulation to begin implementation in the spring of 2021, around early part of May. And that plan will continue on for several years, and there will be a community outreach component to that. So this will continue over many years. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to Perry, who will wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks. So Richard gave an amazingly short synopsis of a very long, drawn out and complicated program. And we have a lot of work to do as the Valley Water Collaborative in not only the outreach, but in the deliverables. So we have, looking at the end first, to give you an idea, we have a March 8th deadline for our first preliminary management zone plan. And going back to the left, where here's our first, in early November, our first community meeting. We're gonna have a series of community meetings throughout the process. Our next will be about a month from now in early December. So as we were talking about earlier, Marisol, it'd be great to get help from you all for doing these events. And I'm going to come back to this when we have questions, but think about this. We were considering doing a multiple translation at a different level with Zoom. And I'm thinking that we may do that where you do a parallel presentation with translation. I'd like to get some thoughts on that from you. But in those, the second and third meetings, we would have that function available if there is the interest. And I see with that we did have one request already here on the chat room. Anyway, so once that document gets near its draft form, as Richard said, we will have a public review of the draft early action plan available the first of next year. And then throughout February, before the deliverables, we'll have a public review comment, the entire preliminary management zone proposal. And that's the community outreach level. And at the lower part of the schedule there, we have another group of individuals. Richard went through them. We call the stakeholders. This is the irrigation districts, the GSAs, the farm bureaus, the cities, water system people. That we had a first series of meetings about 2 weeks ago with them, and we will continue with them on a parallel track with community outreach, with a meeting once a month up until the deadline of the deliverables. And then once the deliverables in, if we go to the next slide, you'll see then the work begins. Once that document is turned into the regional board, they have a public and regional board review period. So it will go out, as will all the management zone proposals in the Central Valley, for regional board and public review and comment. We expect to get that report back, and then we will prepare a final management zone proposal later in the fall of 2021. However, after we've turned in that, moving above on the above line, as soon as we turn in that preliminary management zone proposal, it will have the early action plan, and we'll begin working on that 2 months after that submittal, even before we get approval. We're going to start working on the logistics of the sampling program, figuring out the well sampling and delivery and maybe installation of water fill stations. And we anticipate that well sampling should be available by late summer, early fall. And possibly a year from now, we will start water deliveries to these targeted areas. And if you think back to those maps that Vicki showed you, the priorities will be the areas where the high nitrates are. The basin is quite large, but we expect to have the focused initial efforts are going to be in the areas where we have a good idea that there are high nitrates. And then once that final management zone proposal is in, then we develop this long-term program that has to start outlining the permanent drinking water solutions. That could be permanent treatment. It could be connections to existing city water systems. There's a lot of options out there, or not a lot, there's a few options out there that are going to need to be customized and developed and thought through by having these community outreach meetings to see where are areas where we might be able to take advantage of an existing public water system to add these homes, these rural residences or semi-rural areas onto already a treated water system. So it's a very ambitious schedule that we have. We're encouraging all those, even a little bit interested, to go to our Valley Water Collaborative website and sign up for our mailing list. We have a stakeholder and a community outreach list. Anyone can sign up to both of them if they want. Then for those that really want to do a deeper drill on the nitrate control program, the CV Salinity Coalition is an organization of entities that have worked on developing this program. And we have all the documents, all the background information, preliminary studies. There was even a pilot program done in Turlock last year that was funded by the state board. So we've kind of gone through what these management zone plans will look like in a pilot program. And that gives you a really good idea of what these plans are going to look like. And then, again, I mentioned before on our website, we have, we're going to be posting, or have a place to sign up, but we're going to post all these presentations. We are recording these, so they will be available on our website within a few days. And then we'll have program updates. We'll have kind of like a list that sends out updates to people that sign up for it when they're made available. And then we'll have these next community outreach meetings, probably the first or second week of December. We haven't set a date yet, but we will be sending an announcement out to everybody that got the original, this announcement, and then those that are added on subsequently. And we're really looking for partners like you, Marisol, your group, to help us distribute these to your list. If you want to share your list, we'll add it to the database, or you can just send it out to your list, and we don't need it necessarily, but we'd really appreciate any assistance you can have, and anyone else on getting the word out on this enormous program that we're undertaking. So, any questions on that part of it? Marisol, or anyone else for that matter that's on the call that has some thoughts about what you just heard or questions?
Yeah, I definitely have quite a few questions.
Okay.
Yeah, this sounds great, and it does sound like it's quite a quick turnaround for all of these things, which is pretty exciting that things will be moving rather quickly. It's just out of curiosity, I'm assuming you're doing similar efforts in other regions, what were they, management zones in the valley? Are you
Yeah, the
doing this
management
concurrently?
zones are being managed by quasi-industry groups. I guess you would call them similar groups that we have in Turlock and Modesto. There's a Chowchilla group, and the Madera Farm Bureau is taking the lead on that. The Kings Basin, which is around Fresno County, and they are being managed by the Irrigated Lands Program Coalition. And then there is also a management zone in the Cahuilla and Tule basins in the south part of the valley. Now, those are priority 1. There's a whole nother level of priority 2 basins that are going to get the same notice that the priority 1's got in about a year. And that would include Merced County and, the Merced Basin and the Madera Basin in the northern parts of the valley. And there are other basins further south that are also preparing plans. And then Yolo County up in the Sacramento Valley is a priority 2. So they will be starting the same parallel process that we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah, we definitely have some in the Fresno area. We have some community residents who are actually on wells that have been tested and have exceedances for nitrates and other contaminants.
Yeah, if you want, we could put you in contact with the Kings folks that are developing that plan and plug into that effort there. They're on similar timelines that we are.
Yeah, that would be great because we definitely have community residents that we are currently working with to address some of that contamination there.
And so
the Kings Basin definitely goes into Fresno County.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, Marisol. I was just going to mention there is for the Kings, is also the Tulare Lake subbasin. Both of those are being managed together as one management zone for the Kings River Water Quality Coalition area. And there is going to be a public meeting on November 19th. So if you have colleagues or the public that would be interested in attending.
Okay. My other question was about the early action plan. You said it was going to be, implemented over several years. Is there a sort of a time limit or on how long that early action plan is going to be covering?
There's going to be an overlap, and I'll start in Richard's our plan man, but generally there's going to be some overlap. The early action plan elements in some areas may be the medium-term solution, but there's other areas where the long-term solutions may be more readily adaptable to the situations related to any public water system availability and other things. But the early action plan and the long-term plans will have merging together and have similar goals.
Okay.
Richard?
And all I would add, we have a figure that we didn't include in today's presentation, decided it was too much information, that shows the early action plan will kick off about May and it ramps up very quickly to address the immediate needs in about, let's say, 1 to 2 years as the long-term plan is developed, and then it has to go through the regional board to be approved. So once it's approved and starts to be implemented, it too will have its solutions to be worked on. And that will kick off and it'll rapidly grow as well. And so in time, it will replace the early action plan. So the early action plan is essentially a stopgap. It's a bridge to get to the long term.
Right.
Okay, that's great. And it's just 2 other questions. So my other question is about so I'm not too clear. So the Valley Water Collaborative, that's sort of that stakeholder. Are you guys a stakeholder group that's going to be developing the plans and doing the outreach, or is there a separate?
Yeah, we're the group that is going to represent the Modesto and Turlock basins. We're preparing the plans for those basins, and we're the ones responsible to pay for the program. At some point, we're going to pursue state monies and grants to do some of the work, but yeah, we're the nonprofit that was formed solely to implement the management zone efforts.
Okay, and so okay, so you're going to be going after grant funding to implement some of the mitigation measures. Yeah, that was another question, like what the funding mechanism was.
Right.
And also for the enforcement authority.
At some point, yes, but the activities in the medium term, probably through next year, I don't anticipate that we'll have major grant support. We're trying to find elements of our program that fit the SAFER program, but the majority of the activities that we'll be doing in the early action plan will be funded by the Valley Water Collaborative members and the other WDR holders that take the management zone approach. And what we didn't go into very much is there's 2 options that a permittee can take. Path A is do it on your own, figure out your problem, solve it, and show you don't have impacts, or you join with a management zone. So we're not sure of how many are taking Pathway A yet, but it's looking like the majority of WDR holders, cities, wineries, dairies, irrigated ag, and such will be in the management zone, Pathway B.
Okay. So I guess your group is sort of trying to, herd together all of the dischargers so that the action can be undertaken by sort of split that cost and make it more efficient.
Right. The core industries are there now. Irrigated ag, dairy, poultry, the 2 major wineries, most of the major cities, and some of the smaller cities are already around the table and saying, we're going forward. So the ones that we're unsure of are typically the smaller, and Richard, I wouldn't even know how do we categorize those that are, I don't think we have a clear sense of those that are going to try to take Pathway A.
Right. I think a number of those will ultimately come around because they are small, they are not as, I hate to use this word, but I'll say educated in the regulation. They're still learning and still trying to evaluate how it impacts them. And I think as we interact with them more and more, they'll understand this is probably the more cost-effective approach.
Yeah.
There are legitimate entities that have a permit that pathway A may make very much sense to them and it will work for them. So they have to evaluate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and I see the November 19th meeting at 6 p.m. Thank you for that information.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at this next December round, we'll have a little bit more detailed information and talk more about the strategy for the outreach. And, you know, it'd be good to have the real live meetings like we were talking earlier in the phone call where, you know, you can entice people to come with a great meal or something. But I think until a vaccine is out there widely used, I think this is going to be the medium that we're going to be relying on.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing that really works for us when we're doing even these Zoom calls is, you know, if you know that you're going to be presenting to a group of people right outside the city of Ceres who are having issues, then, you know, those maps that you guys showed are great. But if you sort of zoom into this is where you are and this is the impact on you, then you got them hooked, for lack of a better word, right? Yeah. Because then it's salient and it's relevant to their neighbors, to their schools, to their homes. So that's one way to make sure that first meeting that they attend, they really see how it's going to benefit them to continue to participate.
Right. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And you know, the information that's available now is great. The GIS mapping and the mailing lists are, you know, either from political campaigns or other people before us. They've pretty much fine-tuned these contact, especially the mailing addresses and such for folks. And then we'll, I'm sure, get on the social media pathway too that's directed to neighborhoods when we're really rolling out the program.
Yeah. Awesome.
So any, Lydia, any other hands up in the audience?
No, Perry, no hands, no questions in the chat.
Well, thanks everybody for participating. Appreciate taking the time this evening to come hear our presentation.